Welcome to Bonehead Weekly. Our special guest writer, Mark Steensland. See, now I tried to say it as correctly as possible. And as we were getting started, you were telling me you used to keep a collection of everyone who got it wrong, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I used to work for a magazine as an editorial assistant. And so all the press releases were sent to me. And it was incredible how many of these companies would just misspell my name, all kinds of variations, putting letters in that don't exist, leaving letters out, of course, and so on. And so I kept all of those and put them up in my cubicle. So I was wallpapered with all of the misspellings of my name. But, that's the way it goes. So
that's okay. Nobody ever remembers us either. So you not only have written books, you've written journalism, you have written screenplays.
Yes.
And so we try to do as much research as we can on every one of our guests, but you have been a little bit harder to find different things about. So if I give you a question, you go, that's very generic, I apologize up front.
Okay, no worries.
So the writer of Jacob's Wife. Before we get started, previously of how, what got you to film, what got you to want to write, I'm curious. Miss Kathy Charles was on the show beforehand, and she said something that I found fascinating, which was that she did not mind. She actually enjoyed rewriting other folks' scripts.
Right.
Now, I'm curious because you were on it. You were doing it before her. How do you feel about other assholes rewriting your scripts?
Well, now that's your word.
Well, this is Bonehead Weekly, and if you had watched a few episodes, you would realize
I have.
We're very jovial.
Yeah, so I noticed, by the way, that you gave Lady Charles a name like that, but you haven't called me Sir Mark or Sir Steensland yet. So.
I will call you Sir whatever you like. You just have to tell me. So, Sir Steensland.
No, I prefer Professor.
No. First, you show us your phone made out of a coconut, and I will call you Professor.
Now, we did not know there was going to be a Gilligan's Island reference today.
Actually, I was going to show you my drum kit, but no. Anyway, okay, so
I want Captain, my captain.
Yeah. Okay.
Keep going.
So Jacob's Wife. I was the original writer on Jacob's Wife. It was my screenplay. I wrote it back in, the original version of it was way back in probably 2007 or 8. It never was completely written at that point. I had the didn't actually write the script until 2015 is when I finally finished the screenplay, and then submitted it to some screenwriting competitions, including Shriekfest, which I had been in before, and is a great competition. It's the greatest horror film festival in the world, and so then I ended up winning the top prize in the screenwriting competition for Jacob's Wife in 2015. And Denise Gossett, who is the founder and the person who runs Shriekfest, I knew that she knew, and I am a huge Barbara Crampton fan, of course, and I thought Barbara would be perfect for this part. And so I asked Denise if she could help me get the screenplay to Barbara, and she said yes. And we got it to Barbara, and Barbara read it and contacted me immediately and said, I want to do this. I want to produce this movie, and I want to star in this movie. And that started then this very long process, over 5-year process to get the movie into the version that you are now seeing. So there were, this is really standard procedure.
I know.
With most things is that, you're always working on finding the film that you want to make, and go through something. I did some rewrites on it for a little while, and then other writers came on, and I just kept telling Barbara, you got to do what you got to do. I want you to make the movie you want to make. You're the producer. And so, you know, she kept going in that direction, obviously working extensively with Kathy. And then, of course, once Travis Stevens came on, then Travis doing his own work on it. And, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen in that process, but film is a collaboration. It's unique in that sense. And so that's what happens. It's not just the screenplay. I mean, really, if you think about it, and I've heard this said in different ways, I say it like this, which is, you know, you make a movie 5 times.
Yep.
You make a movie when you write it, you make a movie when you cast it, you make a movie when you shoot it, you make a movie when you cut it, and you make a movie when you score it. And every single one of those things has the power to completely change the movie. I mean, all you have to do is look at how many times movie scores have been recorded for movies and then thrown out, and another composer is brought in to completely rescore the movie. And so, you know, that's just part of the process. So one of my favorite things that Travis did, and from what I understand is he's the one who was responsible for this, was changing the character of the master from the male version that was in my screenplay to the female version played by Bonnie Aarons. And I mean, when I heard that, number one, I was like, that is a great idea. And when I heard Bonnie Aarons was going to play the part, you know, I was like, of course, ecstatic that that was happening. So yeah, I mean, there's all the good stuff that comes out of it, you know, as well. So just part of the process.
Now, I've heard that before, but that's fascinating. I saw James doing this because I think we're 5 times. You always hear I usually hear the 3 times. You make a movie when you write it, shoot it, and then edit it. And then all the greats normally say you don't have it till you start putting it together.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then you just kind of rewrite the whole movie again. But I never heard that 5 times. That's fascinating. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, sure.
I am totally stealing it.
Yeah, well, please do. I mean, it really is those things. I mean, you know, when you have a cast and you have a very, very particular cast, obviously that changes everything about who those characters are and how they are going to appear and so forth. I know you asked Kathy when she was on if she wrote with particular actors in mind. And I mean, I do that all the time. What I do frequently, though, is I do impossible casting. So for instance, you know, I haven't done this specifically, but for instance, like I will write for a character played by an actor, but from the 1970s version of that actor. You know, so there's no way you can get that actor to play this part, but that's who I'm thinking of, you know.
For example, are you talking about Pacino before he started screaming?
Well, yeah, you know, or for
it's not a dig. I like Pacino screening, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. The guy that's in The Godfather 2 is not the guy in Scent of a Woman.
Right. Yeah. No, that's for sure. Yeah. So yeah, and that creates a very interesting kind of dynamic for me as a writer then, because I can see it in a very particular way, but I also know, you know, that I'm not quote unquote in danger of having it happen that exact way. You know, somebody's not going to say, oh, I'm going to play this like that, because, you know, that style of performance or that particular actor is not around anymore in that sense. You know, they're either older or they're gone. You know, I write for dead actors a lot also, or with them in my mind, you know, just because it does help with the process sometimes.
Mark, that's fascinating, because I don't think, guys, we've ever talked to a screenwriter who gave us that answer before, who's talked about that, of specifically of pulling an actor out of just a time period. And like I said, Pacino's the best example I can think of. There's a ton, but that's the one that I think most people would, if you look at him in Scarecrow,
right?
Look at him in, you know, Glengarry Glen Ross. Those are 2 totally different people.
Right.
Oh, it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
What's the most obscure one? Can you name
me
one?
Oh, you mean casting wise?
Yeah, casting wise, as far as you're writing it in your head, but you're writing it for this actor at this time period.
Well, the last thing I wrote, I had Karen Black in my head for a particular part. So I mean, you know, she's not obscure to a certain group or certain fan base.
Not to us, but
correct. Yeah.
Right.
But you know, I mean, she's a very specific kind of performer. And so, yeah, I definitely had her in mind for something that I was writing recently.
For some of our folks in here, The Cultured, Five Easy Pieces, Karen Black, or for some of you other, Rob Zombie, House of a Thousand Corpses, Karen
Yeah,
Black.
No.
Mother Firefly. Yeah.
Mother Firefly. Those are two different Karen Blacks.
No, Burnt Offerings, Karen Black.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. I mean, but then also interestingly, not just that kind of era, but then actually as an older actor. So the role is for an older Hollywood actor who isn't working anymore, but she did work. She did make those movies. So it's kind of predicting, this different kind of thing. But again, I mean, it's all about just what works inside my head and what helps get it onto the page in the most natural way possible. And a lot of times it helps to have that sort of distance or separation, sort of pretend that it is another performer, if you will, instead of just me playing all the parts like a puppet show, which is what it is really.
Yeah. So here's my cliched question. What was the movie or the book that got you growing up?
I mean, and I'm gonna say, which probably sounds cliched in itself, which is there were a lot of different things I think that played into really kind of closing the deal, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to be, and my brothers are all a lot older than I was, so they were all really in the Monster Kid era. But it meant that I had all that stuff around me. So like the next closest brother in age to me is 7 years older than I am. So
are you the middle or the youngest?
I'm the youngest.
Okay.
And so in the early 70s, he had creepy, eerie, famous monsters, Aurora monster models, and all that stuff. My parents had been fans of the Twilight Zone. And so when Night Gallery came on television, or was going to be on television, they were very interested to see what Rod Serling was doing next. So we watched Night Gallery, and of course, I loved that. Now you're talking about somebody who was 5 years old at the time, so it was pretty. Some of those were pretty intense for somebody of that age, but I was, definitely all of this kind of stuff was in the atmosphere. And my father died when I was 6. And so, as I often tell it, it was kind of this sort of strange transition to go from all this stuff that was like having to do with horror and death. And then suddenly, I'm in the funeral parlor, looking at his corpse and going to the cemetery and kind of dealing with that reality of death. And so it was a very interesting, I think, very impactful kind of experience for me, because it made all of that stuff that the stories were about real in a way that I don't think it would have been, obviously, if that hadn't happened. About a year after my father died, my mom allowed a man to come into her life. He happened to be a manager at a local 2-screen movie theater. And I think he partly thought that, a way to sort of get on my mom's good side was, make me the star of the show. And she was keeping me around, I think, partly as protection. And so we went to the movies all the time. He took me behind the snack bar, up to the projection booth. I got to see all that behind the scenes stuff. And then I got to watch all these movies. And the movies, that I didn't like were these Saturday morning kiddie matinee things, Born Free, Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion. I didn't like that. I wanted to go back to the stuff we were watching at night, which was Legend of Hell House and Night Watch, or Death Watch rather. And no, I'm sorry, it was Night Watch, the Elizabeth Taylor one based on the stage play. Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, Emperor of the North. I mean, all this stuff. I think probably all of that said, probably Legend of Hell House was the one that really kind of did it for me at that point. So this is 1973, and
He dropped out again. There you are.
Oh, I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. You just dropped out for just a second, right after The Legend of Hell House did it for you.
Yeah, well, The Legend of Hell House did it for me. Seeing that movie on the big screen, I was 7 years old, really had a big impact on me, combined with all of that other stuff. I think it was Phantom of the Paradise a year or 2 years later that really kind of made me appreciate filmmaking as filmmaking. I mean, De Palma is such a master of, cinematic language, and that really kind of kicked it. John Carpenter's Halloween is the one that I think taught me you can do this outside of kind of the traditional big Hollywood studio thing. You can do this as an independent filmmaker. And of course, that was the time when Romero was doing the same thing. Tobe Hooper was doing the same thing. And I was ready to do the same thing myself. And so it's been a very long career of doing or trying to do that kind of thing, hopefully at some point at the same level as those guys were doing. But, anyhow, so.
And imagine where your career would be if you were inspired by Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to look it up. You
never heard of it, Chad? It's a Disney film.
No, it's an MGM film.
It's an MGM film? I always thought that was a Disney film. I thought that was
in fact, the movie poster has the lion in the logo yelling at the bottom. He's no relative of mine.
Oh my God. I honest to God, in my head, because my mom was such a Haley Mills fan. So there was several of those movies that I had. So in my head, it goes right along with A Parent Trap. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
I'm sorry. Joe, you may be thinking of Lambert, the sheepish lion.
Is that one the Disney one?
It's Disney. Yes,
no, I knew what the cross-eyed lion was. But so Hell House by Richard Matheson is my favorite haunted house book.
Yeah.
I wonder how you feel about this, because if you could see past this desk on the other side is the original one sheet.
Yes.
The Legend of Hell House.
And if you could see past this desk on this side is the original one sheet of Legend of Hell House. So
we both have it with the blood and the with the hand. It makes really no sense for the movie, but I love the poster.
Yeah, right.
Right. So why is it that we get in trouble well, you haven't said this, but I'm about to say this when I say I like The Haunting, Shirley Jackson's The Haunting, but I prefer Hell House when it comes to a book. And that is one of those movies that actually, I think, and Matheson said it before he died, why has it, of all the films, by the way, Roddy McDowell, it's a perfect film. It's directed by John Hodge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, Joe prefers Liam Neeson's The Haunting.
I do not, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. Don't you ever.
It's a pretty movie.
Liam Neeson, but you son of a bitch. You keep Jan de Bon away from my picture. Anyway. Why have they never remade that?
Well, Del Toro wanted to for years.
I know, but Del Toro's been attached to everything.
Yeah, well, but that's why he ended up with Crimson Peak, is because he wanted to do Hell House, and so and finally that. I love Hell House. I love the book. I love the changes that Matheson himself made. I think the movie works in some ways better than the book.
Oh, really?
I mean, I think some of the character stuff in the book gets a little, I don't know. I mean, it may be that I experienced the movie first and then read the book afterwards. But you're right. I mean, to my mind, the movie really is. I mean, it is the Mount Everest of haunted house movies. For sure. So yeah, I love it.
It's one of the, we're getting off topic, but I love Roddy McDowell. So
yes,
it may be one of his best performances.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
That absolutely. And Lord Love a Duck. Well, I love Fright Night. We're going to talk about something that's non-horror. I think that's one. The other two have never seen it, and I just caught it on and I have seen it before, and it's hard to find. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Lord Love a Duck. He's a 30-some. He was 37 or 38 playing an 18-year-old psycho in a 60s black and white film.
Oh, nice.
If you have Amazon Prime, it's on Amazon Prime.
Did you watch it, Chad?
I have not watched it. It's on my queue.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
Most bizarre damn thing you've ever seen. You'll love it.
Cool.
You'll love it.
Cool.
You'll love it.
All right.
Anyway, James, you had a question.
I did. So we've talked about writing screenplays and how you do that. I want to jump a little bit because in the realm of small worlds and how these media seems to interact with media, you've written short stories, obviously, as well. We alluded to that earlier. And Laurel Hightower, we've had on the show a couple times.
Oh, cool.
But you and her both happen to be in Midnight in the Pentagram, the anthology. You have a story called Black Jar Man, I believe.
Yes.
I missed that. Laurel was over at my house 2 weeks ago.
Well, there you go. See, this is why you keep me around, Joe. I read books. Anyway,
Completely missed that. I am
as
so
you
sorry.
think about, how do you switch between the two? Because I am the joke that we sometimes make is Joe says, he's a failed director, and I say I'm a failed author. How do you? Because those are two very different styles of writing. I don't think I have it in me to write a screenplay. Some would argue I should stay away from short
You've
stories
written
too. But
3 of our short films, you asshole. Now I
know,
know why we
and look-
failed.
and look how successful we've been when I write them.
Now I know why we failed. Keep going, sorry.
But and so that's my question is, and being a journalist as well, what's it like to, I guess, code switch almost between those 3, or how do you approach those differently, or do you?
Well, I think of all of them as storytelling because I do think that that's really what they all are. I mean, as a journalist, you are telling a story or you're talking to somebody who is telling a story. Obviously, prose fiction, same thing, telling a story. And the way that I think of it is that they are different mediums in the sense of, I mean, a good metaphor perhaps is painting. Some images work as watercolors and other images just work better as oil paintings. If you've ever painted in these mediums, you know how incredibly difficult oil painting is, how much patience you need to put the layers on, to actually wait for them to dry, and then to go into the next layer, and all those kinds of things. And so if you're writing a novel and it's an 80,000 word novel, I tend to think of that as like an oil painting. It is really big. You really have to have a different kind of patience. It's a different sort of approach, but you get into that mindset as you are working with it. Writing a screenplay is a very different experience. I mean, it's a lot more like acrylics, for instance, because acrylics go on quickly, they dry quickly, and that's usually the way screenplays go. I mean, if you prepare them correctly and so forth. I think I spend a lot of time preparing things, and then try not to write them until I'm actually ready to write the script itself. So it just kind of depends on what the story is and which medium it's going to really fit. And sometimes those things connect. I mean, my stage play is one of my favorite things. I think it'll make a great movie. And I keep trying to get somebody to make it as a movie. And I have written things that are books that are adapted into screenplays that have then become movies. I mean, The Special is an example of that. And so, it just kind of, again, depends on the story itself and how much story is there. That's really important for a writer to be honest about, because if you don't have a lot of story, then, make sure that you're trying to finish it in the proper length. Some things are made for short stories and some things are made for novels, and you get into trouble when you try to take a short story idea and stretch it out to a novel, or a novel idea and try to shrink it into a short story. So anyhow,
when you're looking at that, and does I guess obviously I love to live in a world where we think about the art, which is what we really should do.
Yeah.
But there's also the consideration of the market.
Mm-hmm.
Does that ever, as you're thinking about an idea, do you ever think, and I'm not saying Midnight in the Pentagram, but let's say hypothetically, well, there's a call for this and I have this that I could massage in that direction? Or is it more likely that you'll just go in a different direction?
Yeah, I tend not to do that. I tend to really try to find the things that I'm passionate about for one reason or another, and then to try, to execute that the best way that I can. I'm interested in telling particular kinds of stories. I want to tell them as best I can, and I feel like there's always going to be a market for good stories, well, told. And especially these days, I do this thing I teach a class of screenwriting, and I tell the students, producers market for something, because I mean, if anything is being proven by today's media landscape, it's that there is a market for everything. And I show them this example, which is, I don't know if you're aware of a subgenre of the romance novel that are Bigfoot romance novels. Okay, this is where
oddly enough, yes,
we've
somebody,
heard about it. Yeah.
somebody broke their
Bigfoot,
neck to introduce me to that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, women are abducted by Bigfoot, and then they have a sexual relationship with this Bigfoot or whatever. I mean, not that every one of them is like that, but.
And now Mark is judging us because all three of us said yes.
No, not at
simultaneously.
all.
No,
I
Not at
swear to
all.
God,
I mean,
I was at a furry convention and those 6 sons of bitches started talking about Bigfoot. No, I'm joking. Keep going.
Then they said, Joe, we love your costume. And Joe said, I'm not
I
wearing
don't
a
not
costume.
having a costume. What are you talking about?
Well,
I'm
and my
cosplaying.
big problem with the Bigfoot romance novels is it's hard enough for me to compete with mere mortals, but when I'm competing with cryptids, when Mothman can pick up women,
He
He can tell the
literally
future.
can pick up women.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this idea is that, yeah, there is a market for literally almost anything. But what I tell the students is you have to make a decision about how big of a market are you shooting for. You can shoot for that market and you can have this very niche audience. You can get your stuff out there. I mean, all of the mechanics are there for you to self-publish on Amazon, to put your movies on YouTube or whatever you want to do. If you want to be a professional, then there are different kinds of considerations. And of course there are those considerations, but I mean, I like to think that the stories that I write are interesting enough that people want to spend the time and money on them to experience them. And, so far it seems anyway that, that seems to be true. And things are being made and things are in print or people are buying them and, that kind of stuff. So we just kind of keep going in that direction. And hopefully I get to find my audience, so that's for my stuff.
And I'll ask one more question, then
No,
I'll pass
please
the
go,
baton.
go.
But the thing that I always like to ask as well is that sometimes when we talk to authors, I always find it interesting. Is there something that you've written that has gotten a response that maybe you didn't expect it would get, or you have people that come up to you and be like, yeah, that got to me way more than I thought it would, or and what is that thing that you tend to hear the most about?
Well, yeah, that happens all the time and in different ways. So I don't know. I'm guessing you're somewhat familiar with the special, and with what that is about. And so that has gotten some very strong reactions from people. A lot of people are really disgusted by the idea itself. On the other hand, a lot of people have come forward and said, this is really an incredible story about this issue, addiction, and what happens to people and those kinds of things, which was what I was thinking about when I was writing it. I mean, I've had my own issues in the past with addiction, and then, as I often tell the story, was inspired very specifically by a thing many years ago that the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office in Oregon started, which was called the Faces of Meth. And they took mugshots of people who had been repeatedly arrested for methamphetamine violations. And they showed this deterioration, from nice looking person to, this person is covered in scars and they look, 20 years older, and in a very short period of time. And I was just fascinated by the idea that people would do something to themselves, and keep doing it even when this was what was happening. And so it became kind of this thing that inspired me to write that particular version of that particular story. So that gets people in a lot of different ways, very strong reactions to that. The other side of it, and this is the other interesting thing that I tell my students a lot about, which is you really have to see, your films with an audience before you understand how filmmaking really works. And what I mean by that is that, you know, when I was making films and I wasn't seeing them with an audience, I understood everything that was going on. I understood what my shots meant, what my cuts meant, and all that kind of stuff. Suddenly I project it for an audience and they're having this reaction to stuff that was totally unexpected. A short film of mine called The Ugly File, for instance, starts with a title sequence of different shots around the town that I was living in at the time, Erie, Pennsylvania. And, you know, I had chosen all these things that I just thought were interesting examples of architecture. People respond to that and say, oh, there's something terrible going on in the town. That's why it's so like run down and decrepit like that. Like there's some kind of weird something. That's why the babies are like that, you know, and stuff. That's not at all what I intended. And yet that's what the audience is getting. Same thing in Peakers, another short film of mine. We had this fake newscast happening because, you know, the newscaster plays a role in the climax of the film. So we had this fake, excuse me, fake newscast. And we had just written some kind of fun stuff that we thought was sort of clever, or, you know, it was just, we were kind of having fun with it. Oh, this guy who was, you know, participated in MK Ultra experiments and, you know, this, that, and the other thing. People come out of the film saying, oh, it's because of that MK Ultra thing. You know, that's what's happening with these doubles and, you know, this kind of stuff. They make this connection. And so that was unexpected also. And again, I go back to this idea that until you experience that and you realize how powerful this process is and how audiences respond to those things, you don't really know what to do on the other side to engineer those responses in the way that you want to ultimately. So, you know, until you watch a film, again, with an audience and you see everybody laughs at that joke every time, everybody gasps at that moment every time, that's when you realize you're getting it. And now you say, oh, okay, I want the audience to do this now. I'm going to put this kind of moment in there, and that's how this is going to work. And I think that's ultimately, you know, what professional filmmaking is about, certainly. And it takes, you know, like I said, it takes the time to experience those sorts of reactions and understand that's what's going on. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it happens all the time, and it is in these, you know, different sorts of ways. But I think there's something to get out of all of it for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is an odd question. I want to, but how much do you talk about your own films with your students?
Very little.
I was wondering, especially
yeah.
something like the special, and we start talking about holes and things where you put things in holes. I mean,
no, it's not for that reason. It's because I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but at the same time, there is the element of, okay, I am a professional, you know, I am working in the business. I do understand what I'm talking about. And so, you know, I did make it a tradition then to show Peakers as part of a short film block when we are covering that topic in a very particular class, in my intro to film studies class. And so it's part of this group of short films that when we're doing some narrative analysis or genre analysis. And so this, you know, and the students enjoy that. They like the film. It works well. It's short. It tells them that I know what I'm doing, that this is what I do. And, you know, so it goes over well. And then I don't have to, you know, like get into a lot of other stuff. I mean, it's all out there if they want to, you know, if they want to find it. I mean, it's not hard.
I mean, they're already looking, all of us, because we all work in higher ed, they're already looking us up on Rate My Professor and everything else before they even get to the fact that it didn't even occur to me that you teach screenwriting. And as we're sitting here and we're talking, I was like, there's 30 students looking at it going after class or during class, Googling everything that you've done, right? And we're going through it.
Yeah.
So back to Jacob's wife a little bit. One of the things that I talked to, I'll stop calling her Lady Charles. By the way, when I said asshole earlier, I meant it in general.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that if she actually listens to this or watches this and goes, "Did you just call me an asshole?" I was like, well, not really, no. But what I liked about it I like many things about it. I love some of the gender stuff, especially that was changed later, like you were talking about. I love the fact that Jacob isn't evil. He's
Right.
not. He's a three-dimensional person. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah.
He is a man who is actually a pretty good guy, who is just, and we've all been in long-term relationships where, well, this is just what it is, and he doesn't necessarily appreciate any of it. And I don't even know that she necessarily appreciates anything either. But maybe that's just what I'm taking away from it until she has this experience, right? And I just love that about it. So was that from the jump in your screenplay that Jacob's not an asshole?
Yes.
Just a good guy who probably, I don't even know if he's just going through his life. This is his life. This is what he wanted.
Yes. I mean, this is the situation that they are in. That was part of what I was. Oh, I've been with my wife for, let's see, 30 something years. Anyway, and so
we're not going to show her this later. In fact, we'll cut to 34 years. It's really bad.
No, anyway, since 1989. But so there, I mean, that absolutely was a big part of what was going on. That's what Barbara responded to. That's what Travis responded to. I think that's what Kathy responded to as well, was that part of the idea. I mean, a big part of it for Barbara, of course, was, that as an older actor, she's not getting offered those kinds of lead roles. And she saw this very substantial role, not just for herself, but obviously for somebody else, and to play opposite of her, and to have it be these kinds of characters. And so that was a big part of the attraction from the very beginning. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, that was. Look, my dad was an Episcopalian priest.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so priests figure largely in lots of things that I write. And of course, that particular aspect played a role there with Jacob.
Well, who is it okay for me to ask, and I hope it doesn't step on anybody's toes, who did you have in mind? You were talking about you have these actors at some times in their lives. Who did you have in mind for playing Jacob?
Well, that's an interesting story, because when I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, I was teaching at Penn State, and I was making lots of different short films. That's where I made Ugly File. That's where I made Peekers. I was working with this really terrific group of actors, and I really got this great group of local actors together, and we were doing these things together. We actually, at one point, we tried to make the special because I wrote it for these people, and so we tried to get that off the ground. That didn't work. And Jacob's Wife was one of those things where the two actors, the older couple in Peekers, were actually the actors that were a big part of the inspiration for Jacob's Wife. Also was, Al and June would be so much fun to see in this kind of situation. I would love to see, Al hunting around with a stake and hammer. And so they were the actors that I originally conceived of as I was, thinking about the script in its early versions, the version that was only as far as an outline and never got completely written. Excuse me. And so and again, it wasn't until later I moved back to California, where I'm from, and I picked up the script again. By then, I'm pretty sure Al had passed on, and so I mean, it wasn't. Yeah. I knew I wasn't going to make the movie with them, but that was what was at the back of my mind. So kind of a different case there.
So actually, go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that actually, as Joe said earlier, we've done a couple short films, and one that we did And we usually do them with exactly a budget of I think the last one we did box wine and a couple pizzas to feed the cast.
Uh-huh.
But that being said, we use stage actors, and they did phenomenal. One of them will undoubtedly watch this episode. So, hey, John, you did a great job. But that actually brings up a point, because you mentioned you've done stage, you've done film, and is there any way that, if you think about envisioning it, stage tends to be a different style of acting than film does? And so how does that play out when you think about how you're going to write that, or how you would quote unquote stage it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a very different process. And of course, any actor who is going to act in all mediums, again, you're talking about the difference between watercolor, oil, acrylic. You're talking about the difference between screenplay, stage play, short story, novel. And the same thing is true: stage acting, film acting, television acting, commercial acting. They're all different in certain senses. And the biggest difference is, for stage actors, or for actors who love the stage, they don't like this. My experience has been that they don't like the start and stop of film and television acting. Okay, they want to get up to a certain energy level, and then they maintain that energy level. They're accustomed to maintaining that performance for 90 minutes, 2 hours. I mean, think about doing Shakespeare, 3 hours, 3.5, 4. That's a huge undertaking, and very different from, let's deliver these lines, stop, go sit down, come back, and now, give that to me again at the same energy level where you were at. So different actors are going to have a different response to that. And, and that's going to be part of the challenge of making the film, depending on who you're working with. The first feature that I made, my independent, crime drama, which I made for almost nothing, The Last Way Out, I had the script, and then as I was getting ready to cast it, I went to all the local stage productions in my community and watched every play that was happening at that time, and handpicked all the people from all those different productions, and approached all of them and said, I want you in this movie. I want you to play this part. And I got, all of them said yes. And then we had this crazy shooting experience. And at one point, because we were doing it for nothing and I couldn't pay anybody, everybody had to, go do their real jobs or whatever. And so there were several places in that film where none of the actors in the scene could be on set at the same time. So I had to shoot each actor separate from the other actors. One of the scenes involved like 5 actors. And so when you watch the film, it's all cut together. They look like they're all, of course, interacting with each other. None of those people were in the room together at the same time. I was off camera saying the lines that they were responding to, and they're delivering these lines to camera, and then they're leaving, and then another actor is coming in. And I mean, you don't want to do it that way, but it's part of the process. If that's where you're at, then that's what you do. So I think it's just about, kind of goes back to collaboration, kind of goes back to flexibility and knowing what you're doing. And if you've got people who are willing to go along with that, then, that's what works best, of course.
We did a short film called The Third Degree, and basically it changed, like you were talking about with Jacob's wife. Of course, it changed because we're 4 or 5 years just getting it of me originally writing the first drafts. That sound about right, Chad, James? And then, and eventually getting to shoot it, we went from all male to 2 females, and it made it much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I said all that to say, you've said here, and you've talked about different forms of writing. You've talked about how you view yourself as a storyteller. I'm curious, do you view yourself as a director or as a writer or both? And which would be the thing that you would desire the most? Because they are 2 different jobs.
Yeah, they are 2 different things. I mean, I've always really been directed was because I was trying to get people to pay attention to my writing. And so I made a feature because I wanted somebody to see what a feature screenplay of mine would look like. And I made the short films because I hoped that they could go on the festival circuit and create some buzz, and which they did in a lot of instances, and win prizes and those kinds of things. But now, fortunately, the writing has taken I think a different kind of precedence. Directing is very difficult, especially when you have other people who are telling you about what you need to do or how you need to do it or those kinds of things. And I've been very fortunate that everything I've made has been my final cut, my final decision. And I enjoy that kind of creative freedom. So I suspect that if I do something again in the future, that I would want to do it under those conditions. I mean, that may not be the case, but hopefully that would be the case. If I could finance low budget things on my own, and kind of make them the way I want to make them, and then put them out there and get distribution for them and so on. I mean, that's what I've done with these other things. So, I guess that's what would happen. But I mean, as a writer, it's very satisfying. I'm very satisfied with the writing. I really like that a lot.
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, I'm going to go dig into your early career because I love my friend James.
Why?
I noticed that you worked on a TV movie called Escapes.
Yeah, my brother made that movie.
Your brother made that movie.
Yes.
And it starred Vincent Price.
Yes.
And because James is a huge Vincent Price fan, so I have to ask, do you at least have a Vincent Price story?
Well, I mean, I kind of do. I didn't get to meet him when he shot those parts. So my brother made that movie. I mean, it's listed as a TV movie. It was released on video. It's an anthology collection of short films kind of put together. And Vincent Price plays this character introducing the stories, kind of in this Serling-esque fashion.
Yeah.
And my brother knew, he had he didn't have names for the cast. He knew he needed a name for the cast in order to sell the movie ultimately. And so he went after Vincent Price. And when he met with Vincent Price and started telling him about the project, Vincent Price said, the last thing I'm going to do is go on to another, cemetery, fog, candles, coffins, all that kind of stuff. No way I'm doing that. And so my brother pitched him this very abstract, if you've seen the film, there's this long hallway that has like all of these arms kind of coming out of it. And it's very abstract, it's very weird. But Vincent Price, that's why he said yes. He's like, this is different. I haven't done this before. And so he agreed to do it then because of that. And, that ended up being the way, that project worked out.
So how did you feel when your brother says, I got a role for you? Large creature.
Yeah, large creature. Well, I mean, I was willing to do that and kind of get into all the special effects, makeup, and all that kind of stuff. And it was a terrific lot of fun.
Awesome.
He's the second person though. Well, actually the third, because we had the writer director of Whisper to a Scream. Who got, so we had Jeff Burr and oh my God, I can't believe it, Courtney Joyner. Do you know either one of them?
I mean, I know of them, but not
know of them. They've both been on the show, and they both tell the same. And in their defense, their version of going to Vincent's house to convince him to do the wraparound for another anthology, is very similar, except they got bread. right,
Yeah.
guys? They were
Yeah,
baking
yeah.
the price.
Well, Joyner tells the story about he was baking bread. Yeah,
baking
yeah.
bread, and he said it's been 40 years and I could still smell. It smelled wonderful.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
when you're starting out, you worked on several different films. There's Midnight Run. There's you Day of the Dead. So can you talk a little bit about being a bit player and a production assistant and all those things?
Yeah, I mean, all those things are different in one way or another. So Day of the Dead was a very interesting experience. It was from because I was a journalist.
Mhm.
And so the publicist for Day of the Dead, very clever, decided to do the press junket over the course of a weekend, and all of the press people were going to come to the set, get made up as zombies, and put into the movie. That was part of the whole press experience that weekend. And so we all flew into Pittsburgh on Friday night, and then put up in a hotel, and then we got made up, put in the movie during Saturday, and then we had kind of this dinner party thing on Saturday night where we got to interview Romero and all the players, and then Sunday some follow-up stuff and so on. So I mean, that experience then, that's where that experience came from, and it was an incredible experience. I was working for a magazine called Preview, that's Prevue, at the time, run by a guy you may know from the comic industry named Jim Steranko.
I have interviewed Steranko. I
Okay,
actually
well,
I interviewed him last year before COVID at a convention.
Interesting. Well, I worked for Steranko, and
Hate him or love him.
Steranko is unbelievable. He was one of the most incredible working experiences that I ever had, and that is one of the highest and one of the lowest. I mean, it was a remarkable experience. I mean, there's lots of stories there.
No, there are. I was
but-
just curious, and he was great to me, and I didn't know
Yeah.
him to be that damn tall.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so what Steranko told me when I was going to Day of the Dead was, get all of the guys who are below Savini on the makeup crew and tell them you get all of them into your hotel room by themselves and you interview them. They're the ones who are going to tell you the story.
Yep.
And so, you know who it was? It was John Vulich. It was Greg Nicotero.
Yep.
It was Howard Berger. I mean, this was Greg's first movie. I ran into Greg at a convention, a number of years ago, but I mean, many years after Day of the Dead, he's like, "Oh my God, Mark, I still have that issue of Preview that I'm in, because it's the first movie I worked on."
He's a kid. I mean, a kid.
Yeah. Oh yeah, a kid. Well, so was I. I mean,
Yeah.
I was a sophomore in college, and so I was 19, and so I got all those guys. Well, when the other reporters heard that that's what I was doing, they're like, "Hey, we want to come to that too," So Uncle Bob Martin from Fangoria came in, Don Farmer from Splatter Times came in. The other guy who was there, he didn't come to my hotel room, but the other guy who was there was the guy who broke Halloween in the Village Voice, Tom.
I
he's
don't.
the guy
You lost me on that one.
Okay, he's famous for, because Halloween came out and like nobody was really paying attention to it. And
Right.
then this guy wrote a review in the Village Voice, which said, this is, an incredible film. This is a new classic. And suddenly everybody was paying attention to Halloween. And so he was one of the other reporters there. But like I said, he didn't come to the room. Anyway, we had a great time. It was a really incredible experience. And yes, I'm in the movie for a split second. In one of the scenes, Uncle Bob and Paul Gagné, who was writing a book about George at the time, obviously got a lot more screen time, than the rest of us, and they got special makeup treatment and and all that. So yeah, I mean, there's that kind of an experience. I mean, it's a very different experience from when I interned on Mannequin, for instance, which was through the school where I was going. I was going to Ithaca College at the time. It had an incredible internship program, thanks to a producer named Michael Nathanson, who had gone there and was working for this company. So, I worked on Mannequin for 23 weeks in the production office and got to learn everything about how you put a movie together from the best people in the business. John Smith, the guy at UPM, the whole crew had just come off of Billy Friedkin's To Live and Die in L.A. I mean, the stories of To Live and Die in L.A. alone.
Hold on. No. Take a pause. Chad, who was the guy?
Tom Allen.
Tom Allen, thank you. Yeah, that's it.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Let's take a pause. The same crew that did now I'm not besmirching. I saw Mannequin way before I saw Living in LA, okay, as a kid. But the same crew left Freakin' to go do that.
Well, when I say that, I'm talking about,
I just find it fascinating.
yes, well, that's the way it works. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about like all of the key creatives. I'm talking about unit production manager, production coordinator. I mean, the core elements that you need, all of those truck drivers, the drivers, all of that stuff. And John, that's the way it works. You get with the unit production manager, you get hired on their movies. And because it's so challenging when a movie ends, there's what they call, the mysterious flu that starts going through the crew when you start to get to the end of a shoot, because everybody's interviewing, trying to get the next job. And so they're calling in sick to go interview with this movie or whatever. Well, if you're in good with a good UPM, then they get another job and they call you and hire you. And so then you go with them. So, John and his production coordinator, I mean, that's what they did. And like I said, they were the best in the business. And, it was an incredible experience. We were at Bob Altman's Lionsgate Studios, which is not Lionsgate. That's not the what we're talking about these days, but this is way back when he had his own production, offices and a little post-production facility and stuff. And they would rent to movies. I mean, the movies that were in there, I worked on Emilio Estevez's Wisdom, his directorial debut. 8 Million Ways to Die was cutting around the corner. What's his name? They were making another Death Wish movie. Cherry 2000 was up the hall.
Oh, Cherry 2000.
I mean, it's just endless with what was going on in this small space with all these creative people and, just amazing experiences. Yeah, I just really feel fortunate to have had all of that incredible stuff and get to see the business at the time, at that time, because it was very different from, what it has kind of turned into, I think, in a lot of different ways. So
best story you've got that you heard about live and die in LA? To
Live and Die in LA. Best story from To Live and Die in LA. Well,
I gotta ask, we rarely have anyone that even tangentially with Freakin', so
well,
especially during the cocaine days.
Yeah, right. Yeah, shoot, man. I mean, there's so many. Okay, so trying to think of what I can say that won't get somebody in trouble. Even now, but anyway,
we're talking about the same guy that made Sorcerer.
Yeah, I know.
We all know.
Okay, so the film was about counterfeiting, and so Friedkin wanted accuracy, and so he was working with a guy who was an actual counterfeiter, and he said, "I want you to do what you do, and I'm going to film it." And so the guy, did his counterfeiting routine, which obviously at the time, was a very complicated, very sophisticated process. I mean, it's not like now where you have these, scanners that can do this kind of stuff. So all of this stuff that he had to do, which of course is shown partly in the movie, and he produced the first bills, and Friedkin looked at him and said, "Come on. You're kidding me. This is garbage. This is not going to pass anywhere. You're not doing it the way you really do it." And the guy is like, "Okay." So back to work, and he did the real deal. And they were printing this money, and some people on the crew started taking sheets of the money and going out and passing it. And so the Treasury Department showed up. They figured out what was happening and said, "You guys, somebody's passing counterfeit bills, and we think it's coming from here." And then they also had to look at the movie. And when they looked at the movie, they said, "You can't show that. It's literally a how-to step-by-step process of what needs to happen." And so they made him cut a bunch of things and rearrange some things so that it's not, accurate in the way that you could tell how to do it just from seeing the film. anyway, I know of at least one crew member who did take a sheet, who did not spend it, but framed it instead and kept it, which I think is the smart thing to do in that case. But anyway, so yeah, lots of other really crazy stories from that. I mean, lots of crazy stories from, all kinds of stuff. Of course, other things that I've been involved with, but those are a lot of fun.
Like Midnight Run.
Yes. Yeah.
I was rewatching it the other night, and well before this, and I hadn't seen it in a few years, and it holds up.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Does.
Yeah, it's really, really terrific. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was Marty's assistant, the director's assistant, on post-production. So he had a different PA on the shoot, and when they got back from the shoot, then he took another job, and I was hired as the new assistant to Marty for the post-production process. So I was all through editorial, and all through that whole process, sound mixing, and all of that kind of, all of that scoring. We're going out to Danny Elfman's house, when driving Marty out to Danny Elfman's house when he was doing the preliminary scoring at the studio in his basement, and all that kind of stuff. So my most fun Midnight Run story, if you want to hear that one.
Oh, please.
Of course.
Of course. By the way, just speaking real quick about Elfman, I was watching the credits. I forgot he did the music. The whole time I'm sitting there going, this isn't Danny Elfman.
Yeah. No, it's
right?
terrific. No, it's
terrific. And I'm not knocking. I love his.
Oh yeah.
His shtick, his, I love it, but
yeah,
you're listening to it going, this isn't Danny Elfman.
Oh, it is. No, I mean, Danny had scored Marty's AFI student film, a movie called Hot Tomorrows, and Danny and the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo and all that were in the movie. They did music for the movie. So, Marty had a great relationship with Danny from those early days. And so, there was another composer on the film, and then Danny came on, and it was great because it was all the guy. It was Steve Bartek, it was Johnny Vatos, it was all the guys from Oingo Boingo in there with all these other studio musicians. So I'm hanging out in the studio with all those guys while they're recording the soundtrack, and we just it was great. It was really a lot of fun, and lots of fun stories from that too. But anyway, you got to remember, Midnight Run, this is in 1988. So there's nothing digital. Everything is on actual film. And at the time, the sound mixing process was an incredibly complex process where all the sound is transferred to mag stock, which is perforated magnetic tape that runs in sync with the perforated film on the flatbed editors. And then the sound editors have to take each track of sound, obviously, cut it together on, with this mag stock, these flatbeds, and then put it on these reels that play on individual players inside this giant room. So there's 100 magnetic tape machines, these mag stock players that are running simultaneously to the mixing stage, where they're at the mixing board, then adjusting the levels of all of those sounds. Well, when you're going through the process of mixing a movie, then you're watching the movie in these very tiny bites. You're watching 1 minute of the movie, and then you're stopping and you're going back, and he's saying, adjust that. I want the gunshot a little louder. I want the footsteps more, quieter. I want the music up a little bit. And then they make those adjustments. They run the minute again, and we go back again. And you're doing it for weeks, watching the movie over and over again like this. Well, we're getting very far into this process, and we're, not on schedule. The movie's release is coming up very soon. In order to get Siskel and Ebert to review the film on time, the movie has to be flown to Chicago to screen for them, or it's not going to make the show, for opening weekend. Well, we're in the recording studio, or, on the recording stage the night before this has to be in Chicago the next day, still mixing. And we finally finish mixing. And then what has to happen is a print has to be struck of the movie with the finished mixed soundtrack being printed, into the optical soundtrack of this final print.
Right.
And that has to be put together, and then it's going to be flown to Chicago. Well, in order to get it there on time, they bought 2 plane tickets, one for the movie because it's in these giant film cans, and it's going to occupy its own seat on the plane. They bought a seat for it on the plane so they don't have to check it through luggage.
Mhm.
And an editor is going to fly with it. It's Chris Lavenson, a guy who's edited a bunch of Tim Burton movies and Top Gun and a bunch of stuff. He's a great guy, still a friend. And so I have the task of staying in the mixing stage, waiting for this print, which has to be run in real time, waiting for the print to be struck. I take the one print of the movie in my car, and I have to drive it to Chris's house to meet him at like 5 a.m. so that he can be met by the car that's going to take him to the airport, and he's going to fly the print to Chicago. So, I wait, and it's like 3:00 in the morning. I get the print in my car. I drive over to this deli that I like to eat at, Jerry's Famous Deli in Studio City, and I'm going to, get some blintzes while I'm waiting. And I'm sitting there and I'm eating, and I've got the only print of this movie in my car. It's got to be at Siskel and Ebert tomorrow. And flashes in my mind, I should call him and say, I'm kidnapping your print. And if you don't pay me $250,000, I'm not delivering this print. Now, of course, I didn't do that. But I thought, what a great idea for a movie, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore because, everything is digital now.
It's all
and
digital.
So they've got all these cloud-based copies, and, nobody could get away with it. But it boggles my mind that they sent me in a car with the print, into Los Angeles in the middle of the night. And what could have happened, to me if something had happened to it. And anyway, needless to say, it did make it to the plane on time. It did make it to Chicago on time. And, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's just, you're right. And you're young. Think about it. Just take the kid, just take it up there, and then you stop to get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I think Martin would have gone full on Liam Neeson Taken.
That's true.
This is my follow up to Beverly Hills Cop. I will murder.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I knew, of course, it would be the end if anything happened. I mean, it was the end of if anything happened, on all the other jobs I had, but that especially. But it's just it's an unbelievable kind of process and, amazing thing.
Man, we promised we'd try to keep it under an hour. We appreciate you so much. We went over an hour. We've went about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. I apologize for that.
No, not at all. Thanks.
Before we go, let's talk about Jacob's Wife is on Shudder right now, and you can also buy it on Blu-ray, DVD at any store, correct?
Yeah.
Let's talk. Where is the rest of where's your word about our books and our movies? Let's tell people where they can get them.
Oh, everything's linked at marksteensland.com. So if you just go to marksteensland.com, then all the stuff is there. Not everything has a link. I mean, I have covers from some of the early journalism that I did, but I don't have links to online versions of that stuff. I wrote the cover story to American Cinematographer magazine for Big Trouble in Little China. That was Dean Cundy's first appearance on the cover of the magazine as an ASC member. And so I got to spend a few days on the set of that movie.
Oh my God. Why didn't we talk about that?
Well, we can.
Let's do it.
Go ahead. Talk about it.
We got to do it.
Go. You brought it up.
I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. And,
so are we.
And so
He's from Kentucky.
A lot. Yeah, I know. I've been to Bowling Green because of John. When I drove through there, I wanted to visit there. I've also been to Carthage, New York, where he was born. So yeah, a little bit of a fanatic. I've met him a bunch of times, and had a number of interactions with him in different ways on different films. Starman was the first movie set I ever visited, and I was 18. I was barely out of high school, and I had kind of talked my way into getting on that film set. Drove 18 hours to Arizona from my home in California, and got to spend a couple of days on that set watching Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen do cool stuff at Meteor Crater, and meeting John, meeting Sandy, who he's married to now, Larry Franco, and all the group. And so then Big Trouble in Little China was, as I said, I was doing the coverage of Dean for that particular film. So I was on set a couple of times. Once when they were filming the big street fight sequence, where it's a funeral procession, and then the two gangs, confront each other, and all that stuff happens. And that was all that stuff was built on a soundstage at 20th Century Fox. And so, it's obviously supposed to look like it's exterior San Francisco, but it was really inside the sound stages at 20th Century Fox. So that was a lot of fun watching that. And then the nighttime stuff that was like outside the White Tiger, where they drive up and, it's raining and all that kind of stuff. So that was actually shot on, I'm gonna say my memory is serving me correctly on this. That was shot on Halloween night that year, because Goldie Hawn brought the kids, and I'm assuming that means Kate was in that group, to the set to trick or treat. And everybody, they went behind the doors of the facades of the exterior set there, and they went from door to door, knocking and having the door open, and different crew members, and they got to say trick or treat and give candy delivered to them and stuff. And so we had to, they held up production while the kids and Goldie trick or treated while they were visiting, Kurt Russell, of course. So it was, a lot of fun to see that, and, to watch that kind of stuff happen. A lot of fun to see him make magic like that.
Was John still as tight-lipped and kind of, and by the way, he's my second favorite director, and I mean that no disrespect. He just, and I've met him a couple of times, and he actually was very nice to me.
Yeah.
First one being Jane Jabont.
John. But anyway, back to what we were saying.
Are you tired?
Shut up. Oh, there we go. Back to what I was saying. Was he still was he a little bit of the curmudgeon then too?
I mean, yeah, I suppose so. I think that's his thing.
It's just his personality.
Yeah, I think that's his thing. I was desperately trying to convince him to let me write a book about it. And I had worked out a whole, an outline of everything that I was going to do. And I had a great title. And I got the opportunity to pitch that to him directly while he was making Big Trouble in Little China as a kind of separate thing.
Yeah.
And he looked it all over, and he said, no, I don't think I really want to do this right now. And so then years went by, and then I had another opportunity. I went to watch him record the score for Escape from LA. And so I was covering Shirley Walker for Electronic Musician magazine, and John came by the studio for an interview, for a sidebar. And I asked him again, I said, I still, by this time, other people had written books about him, some stuff in the US and some foreign stuff as well. And he said, yeah, I may be interested in that now, but then, nothing ever came of it, unfortunately. So, obviously never happened. But, it's just one of those things, you just kind of go with the way things are. So
I know, but I truly think the man has no desire to talk about himself.
Yeah. I mean, it's the work stands. So
talk about the movies for that most. I mean, you every once in a while you can see someone ask him a question and it'll lead him to something, memory lane.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's if you go through and you watch the interviews, he's got the standard, are we almost done? I got to meet my drug dealer.
Yeah.
It's the same line. I've watched it. It's the same line.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you a great story from Prince of Darkness.
Oh, good. Which is an underrated film.
Yeah.
In case we talked about it the last episode.
So the guys, one of the guys who was an assistant editor on 8 Million Ways to Die when I was working on Mannequin and Wisdom was a guy who also was assistant editor on Prince of Darkness. And so they were shooting Prince of Darkness downtown Los Angeles. And, Shep Gordon and Andre Blay, who formed Alive Pictures and funded those two movies, Prince of Darkness and They Live, were Alice Cooper's manager.
And there's a great documentary about Shep done by Michael by Mike
Superman.
Myers.
Yes,
Superman.
Right.
Superman.
And so,
thanks, Jeff.
Cooper knew that Carpenter's shooting this movie, and Cooper drives down to the set and he wants to watch it going on. And John says to him, "You want to be in the movie? I'll put you in the movie." So Cooper says, "Okay." So they throw this bum gear on Alice Cooper, and the knit cap and the old worm-eaten jacket and all this stuff. And they set up the long tracking shot outside the church that goes across all of the faces of the bums and ends on Alice Cooper. Hold and stop. Thanks, John. See you later. Rushes get processed. Again, we're back in the non-digital days. So the film goes to the lab. It gets developed. The prints are struck. Goes to the cutting room. The guys in the cutting room are watching this, and they're all, "Is that Alice Cooper?" And so John, was so excited about the fact that they knew it was Alice Cooper, and they were excited about Alice Cooper being in the movie, that he literally went back and wrote all that stuff for Alice Cooper as a character, with him with the bicycle, with him leading the other bums and all that kind of stuff, and brought him back to shoot all of that extra stuff, and of course record a song for the movie and and all that stuff. So a really kind of interesting, fun way to end up with somebody like that in a cool spot in your cool movie.
Because the effect they did is something that Alice did on the stage, correct? If I'm recalling that correct, where he actually kills the guy with a bit of the bicycle or something. It's something that they do similar. He did it on the stage, and they just took what he did on the stage and put it in the movie. It's a practical effect.
Yeah, may very well be.
Yeah. Well, now I'm glad we didn't end right there.
Yeah, no, gold mine.
Anybody else you want to talk about before we go?
Oh shoot.
Now I've run out of. I mean, I didn't know we were going to go down a gold mine of Carpenter stories.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote a couple of books on Michael Mann, so.
Oh my God! All right, so I have a story for you.
Yeah,
I won't say the director's name, but we did a 2-part with him. He may have directed Poltergeist 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'll narrow it down. His first name may be Gary.
Yeah.
It came out in our interview. That's the most. He hates him. They used to be partners.
Mm.
Do you know the story?
I don't know that story. I know plenty of other stories that are, whatever they are. I mean, I had a very interesting experience. I had written a book about Michael through Ali.
Yeah.
And that was, I tried to get him to participate and was never able to. I mean, I was trying to get an interview with Michael as far back as the Keep, and believe it or not, I actually got his home telephone number, and I was calling his house trying to interview him about the Keep, and his housekeeper kept saying he's not back from England yet. Like they're still shooting the movie over there. And so I was persistent. That never happened. I actually ended up interviewing Alex Thompson, the cinematographer from the film. But anyway, so years later, then I wrote this book for Michael as part of a series called Pocket Essentials. Tried to get his cooperation, never did. Never got an interview.
Yeah.
The book came out, and I got sent to Michael, and he read it, and he called me up and he said, "Okay, I want you to write the real book on me." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm going to give you access to everything." And this was right when he was starting to make Collateral. Uh-huh. So I was going into the offices when they were making Collateral and going on the set. I was on the set more than any other set other than something that I actually worked on. I was on the set of Collateral and, interviewing all these people. Tom Cruise called me on Oscar night after he gave the Oscar to Peter Jackson for, was it Return of the King?
Yeah, oh
walked
yes, we're
off,
trying.
Yeah.
he walked off stage and he called me to do the interview because that was the only time that he could do the interview for the book. So that was a lot of fun. But anyway, so I had access to all that stuff. I mean, ultimately, that didn't work out. They brought another writer on to write a slightly different book, and they did use a lot of my material because I had done all these interviews and so forth. So I got some cool stuff in the book. But boy, yeah, I mean, the fascinating stories that all of those people had to tell me, Dennis Farina and Dante Spinotti and I mean, on and on.
Yeah.
The list of people I didn't get to interview, like Pacino never worked out, and De Niro didn't work out, but lots of other people did, and really interesting experience. So,
Which is funny because isn't Pacino on the cover
of what?
of the book? Am I looking at the wrong book, or are we talking about the pocket? We're talking about the pocket guide.
So the Pocket Essentials book has a still from Mohicans on it, I think.
Yeah.
And then the Taschen book is the one, the book that.
Oh, sorry,
is,
that's De Niro. That's not Pacino. I was not. My glasses are failing me.
That's okay. So yeah, so I was writing the Taschen book, and then they brought FX Feeney on after me, to do something different. And I was also working with Faber and Faber to do what ultimately was going to be, called Man on Man, which was, those interview style books that they did. That's what I really was, that was what kind of was the first thing that we were talking about doing. And, and then the Taschen thing came up, and that became an extra project. The Faber and Faber thing fell through, so anyway, but yeah, very, very interesting experience, and yeah, lots of really cool stuff from that as well.
I actually was introduced to FX Feeney, am I saying correctly, on documentary about the Z Channel. And I learned about him as I went from there.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he just passed away last year.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your best Michael Mann story, being around the man? Because but remember, I have someone who would want to murder him.
Yeah.
Whom I've interviewed. And then we have a friend who does a show in Australia that we do content for, and he's on back and forth. And he had an interesting experience meeting and interviewing him once as well.
Yeah.
I won't tell that story. But
yeah. Boy.
So most of ours are not positive.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm trying to think of, I mean, obviously he is a singular filmmaker. There is no question about that. I mean,
absolutely.
What he does and the way that he does it is really unbelievable. I think probably, and one of the most fascinating experiences tied to that was going into the space, and he does this for every movie, is and going into this space in the production offices where there's a room that is devoted to only this thing, which is the crew goes to every location that they are going to use in the movie and shoots still photographs of everything that's sort of what the setups are going to be like, with this crew, the behind the scenes crew, going around sort of acting as stand-ins. And then all of those things are posted up on the wall in order, obviously, in film order. Well, there's hundreds of photographs. And when you walk into that space and it's this mosaic and you see the entire movie and you see the way the color shifts across the whole movie, right? Like these scenes take place during the day. So there's this white sunlight, and now we're under this sodium vapor street light, and now we're in this club environment, and so on. And you're watching, and you can see how he's visually planning the entire movie, in that way. It's really an unbelievable experience. I mean, because that's something that I don't think a lot of directors do.
It's
but
like
it
Kubrick.
shows-
Kubrick,
oh,
Kubrick for
sure.
Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a very similar kind of process. And another director that I admire greatly. I mean, for that, because it pays off, in the movies themselves, it pays off so substantially. I think with the end product, and in a lot of those movies, it's really really something else. So I mean, and you're working with something like that. There is a level of control that's necessary to do what he does. So that's the way
just
it goes.
hearing that, it's intimidating. I trying to visualize that in my head. I'm intimidated to think about. I'd be the one that would accidentally knock one off or something. It would be.
Well, that would be the bonehead version of a Michael Mann film, as we come in and slam the door and the photos fall.
I mean, that would be my luck. It would be
That would Bonehead does
trying
Michael
to stick
Mann.
him back up with bubble gum or something.
Yeah.
It would turn into a I Love Lucy episode very quickly.
Basically.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you so much. We have
Of
had
course.
an absolute blast. I hope it doesn't
It's
suck.
been
too
great.
bad for you. Yeah, we've loved every minute of it.
Me too.
Love to have you back anytime you want.
Sure.
That next time, I know you can't talk about what's in production, what you've got sold, what's ready to come out, but when it's coming, you let us know.
I will.
And we will be the first to blow the hell out of it and have you on the show and you can talk all about it. Deal?
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much. It's been a
All
pleasure,
right.
Mark.
Thank you. Yeah.
Uh-huh.